disillusioned, or anything, even unhappy, just sad. A poem by Sally Fisher from her collection Good Question, published by Bright Hill Press and used by permission here on the Writer's Almanac. Supported by the Poetry Foundation, publisher of Poetry Magazine, a monthly devoted to discovering and publishing new voices in poetry. More at poetryfoundation.org. Be well, do good work, and keep in touch.
Good morning, it's 6:50. You're listening to KUNR Reno Public Radio. Marketplace Morning Report just ahead, right here on KUNR. Support for the Marketplace Morning Report comes from Oshinsky & Forsberg, a business law firm located in Carson City, just steps from the Capitol complex, representing clients from all over the country in courts throughout Nevada and Northern California. Oshinsky & Forsberg means business at oshinskyforsberg.com. Currently 61 degrees in the Truckee Meadows, 55 degrees in Elko, 43 degrees at South Lake Tahoe, and a chilly 37 degrees in Truckee this morning. No major accidents to report on the roads for your commute. Today in Reno, Sparks, Carson City, we've got hazy conditions in the forecast this morning, followed by clear sunny skies and a high of 93 degrees. Highs in the high 90s throughout the weekend here in Reno, Sparks, Carson City. High of 82 today in South Lake Tahoe and 90 in Elko. You're listening to KUNR Reno Public Radio.
Harvey, the economy, and the energy market.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by American Express Open. American Express Open is committed to helping businesses with money and tools to bring their best ideas to life and get business done. And by Epson for back to school. Cartridge-free printing with the EcoTank line of all-in-one printers. Refillable ink tank, up to 2 years of ink in box. Learn more at epson.com/ecotank.
From Marketplace in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore in for David Brancaccio. Hurricane, now Tropical Storm Harvey, has caused up to $190 billion in damage, according to some estimates. That would make it the costliest natural disaster in the nation's history. Diane Swank is CEO of DS Economics. She's been assessing the potential economic impact and joins us. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning.
The economic impact of Harvey has only just begun. How vulnerable is this region to this kind of economic stress?
Well, it's certainly very vulnerable. I think many people have looked at it and said, listen, Houston is a lot wealthier area than New Orleans was, and they have an ability to rebuild and get things up and going again much faster than New Orleans did. That said, one, the waters haven't even receded yet, and we don't know the damages till the waters have receded and there's collateral damage to the oil industry. But more importantly, it's very expensive to build. You can't even build an affordable entry-level home because of escalating construction materials costs. We don't have the materials and the ability to rebuild in terms of the cost basis that we once did, especially in the wake of Katrina.
And you have pointed out that there is already a labor shortage in this region. And at the precise moment when that labor is going to be most needed, that shortage is going to get worse.
The labor shortages in Houston and in Texas are acute, particularly in the construction sector. In fact, construction workers have actually declined over the last year, even though they need more. And that's because much of the labor in Texas was reliant on immigrant labor, which is now disappearing. We saw in the wake of the horrible flooding, many people wouldn't even show up to get shelter because they're afraid they would be deported and arrested because of the new immigration laws.
Houston is an economic hub for the U.S. economy. I'm just wondering, is the monumental cleanup going to put a huge dent in GDP or boost it?
We'll see both. It's about 3% when you include the whole spillover areas. Houston's about 2.5%, and it's about 3% of the overall GDP of the U.S. economy. That combined with what's happening to refineries and gas prices, huge disruptions to growth. And so you'll lose a couple tenths off the current quarter. Unfortunately for Houston, that won't all be recouped. In the fourth quarter, you'll see some rebound as people start to reconstruct and rebuild and repair. But again, critical on how fast you can start to get that rebuilding going. The question is, how much can be rebuilt and how quickly?
All right. Diane Swank, CEO of DS Economics in Chicago, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Harvey has also shut down a third of the U.S. oil refining capacity. Pavel Molchanov is an analyst at Raymond James & Associates. Pavel, what is the primary impact to the United States fuel infrastructure as it stands now?
Well, the primary impact is the outages of Gulf Coast refineries. Approximately 4 million barrels a day of Gulf Coast refining capacity is offline.
What is that going to do to gas prices, and when are we going to start seeing that?
Well, in fact, we have seen prices rise at the wholesale level earlier this week, and that will filter its way down into retail prices at the pump. Now, keep in mind, the price of oil is not the issue right now. In fact, the price of oil actually fell after the storm because the fear is that with those refineries down, there is going to be less demand, for processing crude. On the other hand, gasoline prices spiked up. So the difference, of course, is refining margins. With those refineries offline, by definition, refining margins go up, and that makes its way down to the pump. These effects are not long-term in nature.
You mentioned it's temporary. What is the time frame for this disruption? I mean, how long do you think this will last?
We would expect the vast majority of that 4 million barrels a day to be back in operation, within weeks, let's say before the end of September, and gasoline prices, should gradually come back down. It is possible that there will be some long-term disruptions if any of the refineries have sustained serious structural damage, but it's really too early to tell if that's the case.
Pavel Molchanov, Senior Vice President, Equity Research Analyst at Raymond James & Associates. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And
let's do a quick check of the markets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 56 points. That's about 0.25%. S&P 500 is up 0.4%. The NASDAQ is up also 0.4%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by American Funds. Others hope for a good year. American Funds from Capital Group prefers good decades. Securities offered through American Funds Distributors, Inc. And by Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, working to unleash the immune system's power to fight cancer and develop promising new therapies. More at discovercarebelieve.org. And by Fidelity Investments, taking a personal, dedicated approach to wealth planning to help clients build, grow, and preserve their family's wealth. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
In the aftermath of natural disasters like Harvey, contributions pour in to well-known relief agencies like the Red Cross and Catholic Charities. But crowdfunding is also playing a growing role on sites like GoFundMe and YouCaring. Marketplace's Amy Scott takes a look at how the rise of crowdfunding has changed disaster relief.
Maggie Bergen of Dallas, Georgia, wanted to raise money for the Houston public schools, where her sister works, so she set up a GoFundMe campaign.
We just wanted to find a way to help, and this seemed to be the best way to do it.
At last check, she'd raised almost $5,000. Evan Paul with the charity tracker GuideStar says donors tend to give a lot more to projects that support individuals. It's not clear if that comes at the expense of larger charities.
Hopefully, the pie overall is getting larger, and we're seeing more charitable support for disaster recovery overall.
Crowdfunding comes with some risks, says Una Osili with Indiana University's School of Philanthropy.
One advantage of giving to an established nonprofit is that there's a way of verifying whether this is indeed an established organization.
Of course, even the Red Cross has come under fire for its handling of disasters in Haiti and New Orleans. Osili says donors should do their research before making any donation. I'm Amy Scott for Marketplace.
And in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
This is KUNR Reno Public Radio. We're a minute away from 7 o'clock. Hope you're having a wonderful morning. My name is Noah Glick. KUNR gets support from Heidi Foster at American Wealth Management, providing sophisticated investment management and customized financial planning. Securities offered through Foothill Securities. Member FINRA SIPC. Information at 332-7000. Broadcasting from the University of Nevada, Reno, this is 88.7 and 91.7 KUNR Reno Public Radio and 91.5 KNCC Elko. We're on the web at KUNR.org and streaming live 24 hours a day on our KUNR mobile app, available for iPad, iPhone, and Android devices. Good morning, it's 7 o'clock.
The weather forecast says there will be sun in Houston today, which is a relief to victims of Harvey, but the extent of the full damage is still unknown as the storm moves northeast. It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm David Grain, broadcasting live this morning from Houston, Texas.
And with Elsa Chang, I'm Rachel Martin in Washington, D.C. This hour, how the rescue and recovery efforts are ramping up in Texas and how other Gulf states are weathering the storm. We'll also hear how the floods are affecting Houston's most vulnerable populations. Plus, a federal judge puts a roadblock in front of a Texas law on sanctuary cities. And a scandal deepens at Wells Fargo. The number of accounts opened without customers' permission rises drastically. It's Thursday, August 31st. Actor Richard Gere has a birthday today. He is 68 years old. The news is next.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. What's left of Tropical Storm Harvey is causing flooding in parts of Louisiana, and it's headed for parts of Mississippi and Arkansas. The National Weather Service says the storm could now pour as much as 10 inches of rain in western Tennessee. The rain is finished in the Houston area, but emergency officials are expanding a mandatory evacuation zone near the swollen Barker Reservoir in West Houston. NPR's Nathan Rott has more.
The Barker Reservoir and neighboring Addicks Reservoir have been surging in recent days, even as the rains have ceased over Houston. Stormwater has filled Addicks Reservoir to record levels, causing flooding on all sides of the earthen dam and levee system. Officials have been trying to empty both reservoirs to bring water levels down. There were concerns earlier in the week of a possible breach, though now officials are saying that's highly unlikely. The new mandatory evacuation areas were already under a voluntary evacuation notice. Water levels have forced officials to upgrade that to mandatory.
NPR's Nathan Rott. Houston Public Schools were supposed to open this week. Now the superintendent is trying to decide when school can restart following the hurricane. Houston Public Media's Laura Eisenseat has more.
Houston Superintendent Richard Carranza says that they're visiting all the school buildings they can to see how much damage they suffered. The district's also checking on teachers to see who's able to come back to work. Carranza says he's been getting advice from other school chiefs who've dealt with crises in places like New Orleans.
You just have to accept the fact that post the tragedy, that, things will be in disarray. And it may be in disarray for months.
At the same time, Carranza pledges the school year won't be lost. That may mean school buses picking up kids from shelters or consolidating some schools while they repair damaged facilities. For NPR News, I'm Laura Eisenseat in Houston.
Emergency response officials in Harris County say a chemical plant experienced an incident this morning. Some containers at the Arkema plant outside Houston ruptured and caused a fire. There were earlier reports of an explosion, but emergency response officials continue to insist the incident was limited to container ruptures. A judge is blocking a Texas law that would have banned so-called sanctuary cities. Joey Palacios of Texas Public Radio reports.
The law was scheduled to go into effect Friday. It would have allowed police and other law enforcement in the state to ask about someone's immigration status while detained, even if a department's policy forbid those questions. It also required jails to comply with immigration detention orders. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says the ruling will allow gang members and dangerous criminals to prey on Texas communities. The state plans to appeal. For NPR News, I'm Joy Palacios in San Antonio.
On Wall Street at this hour, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 73 points at 21,966. The Nasdaq is up 10 points at 6,402. You're listening to NPR News. Officials with the bank Wells Fargo say they found another 1.4 million potential fake accounts. That's in addition to the 2.1 million fake accounts discovered earlier in an internal review. Wells Fargo has acknowledged that its employees open these accounts for customers without getting their permission. Wells Fargo is a financial supporter of NPR. Britain's Princess Diana died 20 years ago today in an early morning car crash. As NPR's Frank Langfitt reports from London, many now credit her with humanizing the royal family and encouraging British people to be more open about their feelings.
Diana's sons, Princes William and Harry, honored their mother yesterday by laying flowers at the gates of Kensington Palace, her one-time home. After her death 2 decades ago, owners left a sea of flowers there, an image that defined the extraordinary outpouring of grief at the time. Diana had been an unusually open royal, speaking publicly about the failure of her marriage and her battle with bulimia. Prince Harry's continued in that vein, telling British media earlier this year that he'd come close to a complete mental breakdown on a number of occasions. The prince, along with Prince William and his sister-in-law, the Duchess of Cambridge, have set up Heads Together, a charity which promotes mental health. Frank Langfitt, NPR News, London.
Officials in Mumbai, India say a 5-story building has collapsed, killing at least 16 people and injuring 30 others. It's believed as many as 25 people may still be trapped. The collapse occurred as torrential rains strike Mumbai and the surrounding region, triggering massive flooding. I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fidelity Investments, taking a personal, dedicated approach to wealth planning to help clients build, grow, and preserve their family's wealth. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
Good morning, it's 7:06 for Reno Public Radio News. I'm Noah Glick. 3 wildfires are currently burning across the KUNR listening area. The Slinkard Fire continues to burn in Slinkard Valley, west of Topaz in Mono County. KRNB reports the blaze is now 4,700 acres, and fire officials say there is no containment at this time. The town of Topaz has been evacuated north of Highway 89 to the Nevada state line. For public safety, Highway 89 remains closed between Highway 395 and Highway 4 at Monitor Pass. Highway 395 is closed from the junction of State Route 182 in Bridgeport to the Nevada state line. The Tohacum 2 fire is burning in Washoe County on the northeastern side of Pyramid Lake. It has burned 30,000 acres and there is no containment. It's possible the blaze could make its way to the annual Burning Man Arts and Culture Festival in the Black Rock Desert. State Route 447, the Pyramid Lake Highway, the main road into Burning Man, is closed in both directions between Empire and Nixon. Officials recommend the alternate route upstate from Alturas, California. And another lightning-caused fire, the Needle 2 fire, is burning 15 miles northeast of Sparks near Pyramid Lake. It has burned nearly 1,000 acres, and that blaze is currently 60% contained. We'll keep you up to date on the latest with wildfires right here on KUNR Reno Public Radio. Currently 60 degrees in the Truckee Meadows.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. With Rachel Martin, I'm Elsa Chang in Washington, D.C.
And I'm David Green reporting from Houston, Texas. We are following reports this morning of explosions at a chemical plant in Crosby, Texas. That is about 30 miles to the east of where we are. It's northeast of downtown Houston. The Arkema plant lost refrigeration, making compounds at the facility extremely volatile. At least one deputy was taken to the hospital after inhaling fumes.
Wow. This is a city just starting to assess the damage done by Hurricane Harvey.
We all know this has been a devastating storm, and there are going to be tremendous needs that have to be met. And not all of those needs will be met by government. We will need partners.
That's Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner speaking to reporters last night.
Yeah, and Elsa, I mean, it's a strange thing because floodwaters, you can see them, they are dropping in some areas, but also rising in others, and there are concerns because some rivers are not expected to crest until Friday. We should say more than 24 people are known to have died in this storm and its aftermath, but that number may grow as police and other recovery personnel begin to visit flooded out areas.
Harvey is now a tropical depression, and it is heading from Louisiana out toward the Mississippi and Tennessee valleys. It is still dumping substantial amounts of rain and creating new challenges for people in its path. To help assess the situation, NPR's Debbie Elliott joins us now from Beaumont, Texas, not far from the Louisiana border. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. I want to first talk about what's happened in Crosby, the explosions at the chemical plant. What else can you tell us about that right now?
Well, right now, Highway 90 is closed off. People from a 1.5-mile radius had been evacuated in advance of this because they knew this fire was imminent. When they lost their backup generators, the plant was flooded. These chemicals need to be cold. So they started reacting and burning, and there are plumes of fire. There were a couple of explosions. More are likely. It's not safe to be on the site, so the plan is just to let the fire burn out. You know, FEMA Director Brock Long talked about it this morning, saying that that plume coming from that plant is extremely dangerous, and that there are questions now about whether and when emergency officials will be able to get in there to assess the impact.
You are about 100 miles east of Houston, right? What has it been like there since Harvey's latest landfall yesterday?
You know, it's very much in crisis mode here in Beaumont and also in Port Arthur, just to the south. I woke up today to no water service here in Beaumont. Both of the city's water sources are out. The facilities are underwater, and they can't even get in to figure out what needs to happen to restart them. So they're in the process of trying to figure out what to do. FEMA says it's working with the Department of Defense to set up some water distribution centers throughout the city so that people can come and get water. You know, before dawn this morning, people were lining up at the local Walmart to get supplies. Water, of course, chief among them, but also the basics. You know, people who have had their homes completely flooded and left with nothing but the clothes on their back are trying to get in to get, you know, new underwear, clothing, everything that you need just to get on, you know, day to day.
And we've said you are also close to the Louisiana border. What have conditions there been like?
You know, not as devastating as here on the other side of the border in Texas. Some localized flooding, but the governor there, John Bell Edwards, has been sending resources to help Texas. He actually set up a makeshift a supply station on Interstate 10 where it was closed so that he could help get buses for evacuation into Texas and other sources, because right now the search and rescue is the priority. As I mentioned, down in Port Arthur, it's to the point where people are calling and not able to get help because the 911 system is so backed up. The mayor there, Derek Freeman, went on his Facebook page, you know, his house was underwater. He talks about what is happening and promises that they're not going to abandon people. Here's what he said.
We got some water, y'all. Harvey wasn't playing. I know one thing, though, it's not going to defeat us. I know that for sure. If you're still in your home, we're coming.
So you see, just telling people, we're going to get to you. Now, the people who are getting evacuated by things like dump trucks, helicopters, airboats, there's not a lot of places for them to go. The shelters are stressed. A lot of people in Port Arthur are actually sheltering in a bowling alley.
Oh, wow. I mean, there was also this really dire warning on Facebook from Tyler County Judge Jacques Blanchet. He was advising folks along the Neches River that there were going to be planned water releases and that people should evacuate or write their social security numbers in permanent marker on their arms so their bodies can be identified. Was that alarm? I mean, are people reacting with alarm to that Facebook post?
Well, the people who live there probably know they need to get out or die, as the guy said, because they live along the river. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was planning to open some floodgates, and that meant that those communities that, you know, specific communities in that area needed to get out and be ready. You know, that's going to be playing out over the next few days and maybe even up to a week. These rivers and bays and bayous are all cresting, and they're going to cause flooding in different areas, further exacerbating the emergency that we're going through right now.
All right, that's NPR's Debbie Elliott joining us from Beaumont, Texas. Thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome.
We're going to stay in Texas, where a federal judge has just temporarily blocked a Texas state law that punishes so-called sanctuary cities like Houston, Dallas, and Austin The law would have allowed police officers to ask people about their immigration status during routine interactions, like at traffic stops. The move by this federal judge now prevents officials from asking anything like that, while so many people are trying to get help after Hurricane Harvey. We are joined by NPR's Scott Horsley now to talk about this. Hey, Scott.
Good morning, Rachel.
What's been the reaction thus far to this move?
I was just looking to see if the president had tweeted. He has not so far this morning, but we've seen an angry reaction from Texas Governor Greg Abbott. He says this ruling will make Texas communities less safe, and he promised an immediate appeal. The federal judge who issued this order, Orlando Garcia, is a Bill Clinton appointee, and he was a Democratic state lawmaker in Texas back in the 1980s. The appeal will be heard by the Fifth Circuit Court in New Orleans, which is considered one of the more conservative appeals courts in the country.
And this is obviously part of a broader fight over sanctuary cities that's happening across the country, right?
Yeah, this case involves a Texas law, and it was being challenged by big Democratic cities, Houston, Dallas. It pitted those cities against the Republican-controlled legislature in Texas. But this is very much part of a national debate over immigration. We have seen, for example, the city of Chicago suing the Justice Department over the Trump administration's attempt to crack down on so-called sanctuary cities. And this is partly a legal battle about who gets to make the decision about policing policies. Is it a local decision? Is it a state decision or a national decision? It's also sort of a practical question. The Governor Abbott and Attorney General Jeff Sessions have argued that cracking down on immigrants in the country illegally is a way to make communities more safe, though there are people on the other side who say this compromises cooperation from immigrant communities that police need to fight crime.
This whole thing, though, this tough immigration policies, this is central to the president's personal brand. But it does seem that everywhere he turns, he's getting pushback on this.
This is part of the Trump brand from the very first day of his presidential campaign, when he stood there and talked about illegal border crossers as rapists and drug dealers. These are divisive and polarizing policies, but they're also very much a rallying cry for the president and his base supporters. And that's why, for example, you see the president pardoning the controversial former Arizona sheriff